Thank you, Nichols. Hi everyone. I hope you all are doing good. Today I'll be talking about API pen testing and a few vulnerabilities related to it. So let's just jump into it. Okay. A quick introduction about myself. My name is Abhinav Khanna and I'm currently working as an application security engineer at Not So Secure. Before we get started with the vulnerabilities, just a quick disclaimer that I do not endorse the tools and platforms listed in the slides, and these are not the only ones available in the market. There are tons more. Okay, so again, before jumping on to the vulnerabilities, let's discuss a little bit of what commonly APIs are used to do. The first would be REST APIs. REST APIs are based on REST architecture and they work with JSON and XML both. Now, when it comes to SOAP APIs, they are relatively older than REST APIs and they only work with XML format. The third one, which is GraphQL APIs, they are a bit more flexible than REST and SOAP as we can access a lot of resources in just one single request. All right. So let's go to OWASP top 10 now. We need to take care that OWASP top 10 is considered an important part when we are working on the APIs because today APIs are a very critical part of the business. For today's talk, we'll be discussing about four vulnerabilities. One is mass assignment, the other is improper asset management, the third would be excessive data exposure, and the fourth would be lack of resources and rate limit. All right. So whenever you start with any of your API projects or API assessments, there are a few things that you need to take care about. The first would be that go through the documentation before you actually get started. When you're going through the documentation, you might be able to understand what is the business logic behind the APIs, and you might be able to find business logic flaws related to it. The second would be always ask for API collection, which includes the positive response. By positive response, I mean that when there's no manipulation being done in the request, what would be the right response? And the third would be that do not stick to automated tools for vulnerability identification. See, when it comes to APIs, I've always found out that the manual approach is the best one because we'd be able to find a lot of logic flaws if we go using the manual way. All right. So we'll be discussing the first vulnerability that is called as mass assignment. So mass assignment occurs when a user or an attacker can manipulate the objects which should ideally be not accessible to them in the first place. When we talk about mass assignment, the concept of object binding comes into the place. I've written a one-liner here as well, like let's lie and check if we can get caught. So we'll try to understand this vulnerability using a non-technical story before we actually jump onto the demo. So let's see what the story is. Consider this a cafe, and a person walks in and says that, hey, are you guys serving pizza? And the waiter comes and says, yeah, we do serve the pizza for $10. Now, the person in return says that, okay, hey, I'm the owner's friend. And the waiter, without actually identifying that, okay, if he's the owner friend or not, would straight away give him the discount and would say that, okay, we serve the pizza for $2 to you. So that is something similar to mass assignment, where we're actually not who we are, but we can still access the resources that do not belong to us. For example, if we're not the admin, but we inject the parameter that, okay, is admin equal to true? And if the application accepts it, we might be able to access all the admin related functionalities. All right. So let's try to understand this using an actual demo. So for demo, we have used the contrast free exercise. So what we'll do, we'll go to the forget password page here. We'll enter our own email address and we'll wait for the password reset link to be sent to us. Okay, we have the link now. Now let's try to open the link. Now we'll try to enter the new password and we'll analyze the request. Cool. Now there's something called as is admin false. So what we'll try to do here is we'll try to change this to true and see if the application accepts it. All right. The application accepted is now we'll just try to log in with the new credentials and see if we are able to access the admin functionality. Neat. You are able to log in, access everything that an admin can access. So this is what mass assignment can do. Give you a lot more functionalities than you actually need to take care of. All right. So let's move to the next vulnerability, which is called as improper asset management. And according to OWASP, APIs tend to expose more endpoints than the traditional web applications. And that is why documentation becomes very important. See, if the documentation is properly implemented, we might be able to mitigate the risks related to the retired or depreciated versions of the APIs. Again, I've created a one-liner that, okay, you made a very secure new version, but did you forget to disable the previous one? So what happens is, for example, you have a V2 version of your API, which has everything stored in an encrypted format, which is a good security practice. But at the same time, V1, the version 1 of the API, is still accessible to everyone. And all the data there is there in plain text. It might be a password, your SSN number, or anything. So even though you have good practices implemented on V2, V1 is vulnerable. So again, let's try to discuss this. Let's try to understand this with a non-technical story and see how this can be exploited. Okay, so consider this an office, and this is an ex-employee that works here and tries to enter the office with this old ID card. See, if the employee has left the organization, his ID card should ideally be expired. It should not be valid. But what the person here tries is he'll try to log in, he'll try to enter the office with his old ID card. Ideally, he should not be able to enter. But what happens is he'll be able to enter the office. Why? Because the assets were not managed properly. His ID card was still active. And in an ideal world, that should not happen. Now, let's try to understand this on a vulnerable app. We'll be again using the Contrast vulnerable free exercise for this. What we'll do, we'll go to the vulnerable app. We'll go to the forgot password. And here we'll inject the victim's email ID. Okay, now we don't know what is the verification token. We'll just enter anything randomly and we'll try to analyze the request and response. Cool. We're using the version 3 of API. We'll analyze the request. All right. So the token was not valid, but we got to know that there is a rate limit implemented here. And after 4 attempts, we will not be able to check for the token again. So let's try to enter any random token again. So now what we'll do is we'll change this V3 to V2 or V1 and see what happens. Okay, we are again unauthorized, but we got to know that there is no rate limiting or no brute force protection available here. So it basically means we'll be able to brute force the token and log in into the account of the victim. We run a Python script here, and hey, we found out the correct token. Let's enter this token. All right. So now we are able to log in into the victim's account. See, this is what asset management can do. Even though you have rate limiting implemented on version 3, there's absolutely nothing preventing brute force attacks on V1. And using that, we were able to log in. All right. So let's talk about the third vulnerability. which is called as excessive data exposure. And it normally occurs when more than required data gets shown to the end user accidentally. It's just like you're exposing your secrets to every person you meet. So ideally, you'll not go around and tell your secrets to everyone, right? Just like that. You should take care that the data that is shown to the user is dependent upon their role. Let's try to understand this with an example. Consider this request. Consider this request of a dating app. Usually, on the front end, a few things are available. One would be the name, the second would be the age, and third would probably be the city. But if someone captures the request, say this is a request, and they try to analyze the response. So in the response, we can see that there's name, there's age, there's the exact address, there's the mobile number, and there's the email address. According to the business of the dating app, this becomes the a very critical data. And if we are able to enumerate the ID, it becomes an even bigger threat. So that is how excessive data exposure becomes a huge risk when it comes to APIs. Let's try to understand this with a demo. We've again used the free exercise of Contra here. Let's go to the forget password page. Now, we'll enter an email ID and we'll try to analyze the request. All right. So we got to know that the password reset link is available in the response itself. Using this link, we can change anyone's password and log in into that account. So straight account takeover is possible. So now what we do, we enter the victim's email ID and we got the password reset token here. We'll open it and see if the password reset page gets opened. Cool. So the page got open. We would be able to change the password and log in into the victim's account. So it potentially led to account takeover, excessive data exposure. You should take care that your PAN number, your SSN, or your reset password links, names, emails, depends upon the business. These things should not be there in the response itself. All right. So now we'll be talking about the last vulnerability for today, which is called as lack of resources and rate limiting. One of the most commonly found vulnerabilities when it comes to APIs. And basically what happens here is that there is absolutely no control on the amount of requests that a user can make in a short frame of time. It can potentially lead to DOS, while the other scenarios can range from brute force attacks or flooding attacks. Consider this. It's 5 a.m. in the morning and you start getting a lot of SMSs, like 500 SMS in 2 or 3 minutes. And those are all the password reset links from your favorite e-commerce website. One, you'd obviously be very irritated that, hey, why am I getting so many messages in the morning? And second would be, you'd be scared that, hey, someone's trying to hack my account. So if there's no rate limiting in place, this can happen. Now, let's try to understand this again using a demo. All right. So for this, we'll be using the OWASP security knowledge framework, and we'll try to see if we can bypass the rate limiting on this login page. Okay. So we don't know the credentials. We'll try to view the source of this page. Cool. We got something written in base 64. Let's just try to decode it. All right. So we found the username. Let's just try to enter this as username and password both and see if we are able to log in. No, we are not. So now what we'll do, we'll just try to analyze the request here. Cool. Now we have the request with us. What we'll do is we'll send it to intruder and we'll try to see if any sort of rate limit is implemented. Let's create a payload list. We're using a very small list here, just for checking if rate limit is there or not. All right. So we'll just quickly start our attack and see what happens. All right. So there's absolutely no rate limit in place, and so we have a different response for the 19th attempt. Let's just try to see the response to it. Cool. So we were able to solve this challenge because there was no rate limit in place. And since there was no rate limit, we were able to brute force the credentials. All right. So these were a few vulnerabilities that we wanted to discuss today. Now, coming on to the next thing, the tools that can be used for testing. One is Verbsuit, and Verbsuit is it's one of the most hacker-friendly tool when it comes to dynamic testing. Things like intruder, repeater, decoder makes it the first choice whenever we want to test web application, mobiles, or API. The second is Postman, and Postman comes into picture when we're working with REST APIs. Just like Postman, there's something called as SOAP UI, and SOAP UI comes into the picture when we're working on SOAP APIs. The next one is Kite Runner. Kite Runner is a very widely used content discovery tool. The other one is Astra. Astra is an automated scanner and can quickly just run the scan to see if there are any issues that you can find quickly with this scanner. The other one is Arjun. Now, Arjun is again a very widely used tool for parameter discovery. Just like I mentioned previously, there are other tools available in the market itself. These are a few tools that I use when I'm working on APIs. All right. So let's talk about a recent high-profile vulnerability related to APIs. This vulnerability was found out in Coinbase, and what happened was this vulnerable API allowed unlimited trading of cryptocurrency. It was categorized under broken object level authorization, and what happened was it allowed the attacker to give a command to sell and convert Bitcoin to USD without in fact owning a Bitcoin wallet. So what happened was there was a parameter known as product ID that was going into the request, and its value was product ID equal to Dogecoin to USD or Ethereum to euros. So what was happening was it was converting the value of Dogecoin to euros or Ethereum to dollars. But what the attacker did here was he changed the Dogecoin to BTC and tried to analyze the request. To his shock, he was able to make the transaction without in fact owning a Bitcoin wallet. The transaction took place from an unknown Bitcoin wallet. So he changed it from Dogecoin to USD to BTC to USD, and the application accepted it. At the time it was reported, it was considered super critical, and it was fixed like under 5 to 6 hours of reporting. So think how critical the bug was back then. All right. So that was all. Before I leave, I just want to give a quick shout out to Contra, OWASP, and Security Knowledge Framework for their amazing free content related to APIs. All right. So that's been my time, guys. Thank you for listening. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me on my email and on the LinkedIn URL shared. Thank you, guys.
Awesome.
And thank you for that awesome presentation.